The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. As sitting on committees that have the most jurisdiction over the TSA, I sit on this committee, Mr. Mica's Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and the Homeland Security Committee. These are issues that deeply concern me in my work of Congress, and I'm happy you all are here. I'm happy to be able to discuss this again, and I'm probably the recipient. I've gotten more TSA pat-downs since I've been in Congress than I've gotten pat-downs from my wife. Since the topic of this is perimeter security, I wanted to start with that, Mr. Simon. Do y'all to what degree does the TSA coordinate with the FAA, for instance, on spending on airport security? I know in Corpus Christi, we recently got about $5 million from the FAA to improve security, but has there been any action with the TSA in determining where the multiple dollars are best spent?
Yeah, and I think that's, since the GAO reports you've seen come out, a number of things we've been working for several years to address the specific issue you're talking about. First of all, we worked with the airport community to come up with recommended design guidelines for airport planning and construction. A lot of the money the airports use for planning and construction comes from the FAA. Next, we worked with the Homeland Security Institute to develop a best practices from all the airports.
I'm sorry, I've got a real short amount of time.
Yes.
But you are saying you are now working regularly with the other agencies to make sure the right hand knows what the left hand of the government is doing.
What we're doing is working with the airports. They have a tool. It's a specific computer program they can run through their system. The idea is the FSDs to work with the airports to come up with the optimal security spending per airport. It's not the same everywhere.
Okay, and you talk about high-risk airport. What's not a high-risk airport when I can get on a commuter jet at any airport in the country, end up at a hub airport, and be on the biggest airliner in the world? What would not constitute a critical airport?
I agree with you 100%. The report we got in terms of the 700 innovative measures came from airports as small as Asheville, from the airports such as Delta County, Minot. So it's a mixture of big airports and small airports that have gotten into best practices in terms of what are the kinds of things that are appropriate for each airport.
All right. Again, let me go on to Mr. Lloyd. I apologize for jumping around. I have a lot of questions in a limited amount of time. You were talking about spending on, for instance, baggage screening equipment. I'll just speak from experience. The airport I use most is the Corpus Christi Airport. We have 3 airlines, American and Continental with small regional jets, and Southwest with 737s. Each individual airline has a screening machine staffed by 2 TSA agents. We bought 3 machines for the Corpus Christi airport, and there's probably a 4th one because Delta used to come in there. Why couldn't there just be 1 and a couple of TSA agents? There are never that many people there. Do we have any clue why we're spending multiple?
That's a great question. TSA has an electronic baggage screening program which they're trying to move to what they term optimal solutions for each airport. And essentially what that means, in many cases, they're trying to remove the standalone machines and use more efficient systems or even so-called inline systems which require less personnel to operate. I'm not sure if that particular airport is on track to get an inline system, but that's something.
All right, and let me go to Mr. Ron for a second. One of the things I hear consistently from my constituents, try saying that 3 times fast, is why don't we follow more of the Israeli model of dealing with people instead of things? The answer I've gotten from a lot of people within our government is Israel only has a couple of airports and not nearly the amount of traffic that we have. Could we implement the Israeli system for a reasonable cost in the United States?
Well, first I'd like to say that the Israeli solution is not really an issue when it comes to volume, and I don't think that this is the main consideration. I think that the main consideration is that the Israeli legal, cultural environment is very different from the American one, and therefore I would not recommend to adopt the Israeli model as is. But at the same time, I strongly recommend that the concept that is driving the Israeli solution, which is identifying the level of risk of individual passengers and responding to that with a compatible level of search and the interview as necessary, is the right way. And I think that an American solution that would be more compatible to the American environment can and should be developed and implemented.
Thank you very much. I am out of time. I'm hopeful we'll have a second round of questioning because I've got at least 5 minutes more. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Farenthold, recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity for a second round of questioning. Again, I want to start with the actual topic. We've kind of gone into a whole lot of areas here. Perimeter security. Once you're within the perimeter of the airport, there's a real potential of you being able to do some damage. What's being done to address the much more ease of access to the tarmac area from those involved in general aviation as opposed to those in commercial aviation? For instance, I drive into the general aviation area to board my friend's private plane, and then I wander over and sneak something on a plane. Commercial plane?
First thing we've done about 2 years ago extended the badging requirements to people in general aviation. That caused quite a fuss. There was a lot of pushback on that.
But now there's no photo IDs for a pilot to access his or her plane in general aviation.
If he's regularly on that airport, he has to have a badge. Yes, sir. Based upon where it is. But if he has proximity to the tarmac, the commercial airport, and this caused quite a bit of a ruckus back in, I think it was 2008, when we extended the badging requirements for larger populations within the airport.
But I don't need a badge to get onto the tarmac in a general aviation area. I don't need anything.
If you either have to be accompanied to your aircraft back and forth or in and out of that facility. But if you can be challenged just as anyone else on the facility, if you were there.
All right, Ned. It seems like again, I'm just speaking from what appears to me to be common sense, that there really ought to be a focus on the ground staff that doesn't go up in the airplanes. The 9/11 box cutters were potentially put on the plane by ground crew. The ground crew doesn't go up with the plane, so their life isn't at risk in an attack. It seems like there ought to be a strong focus there.
That's why they are all badged, and they have security awareness training. That's why there's covert testing of those and random screening of people on the tarmac. Yes, sir.
All right, and let's talk a little bit about the behavioral detection. Before I was elected to Congress, I actually had time to watch TV and watched Lie to Me. Is this really a science that works, or is it a pseudoscience? You mentioned that we were able to apprehend hundreds of criminals. Have we seen any positive results of that in apprehending anybody with contraband at the airport?
We did. I believe it was in Orlando several years ago. A person had actually explosive material in his bags. He attempted to get them onto the belt. He was detected as he came through the door by his behavior. He had not been screened. His bags had not been screened. He was pulled over and found that he was attempting to get explosive.
So we've gotten one. Mr. Lord, did you want to comment on that?
I'd like to respectfully disagree with Mr. Salmon on that. I'm not sure he was detected through the BDO program. He had such an unusual appearance. I think he alarmed the passengers waiting in line, and the ticket agent may have alerted locals. So I'm not sure that was truly a BDO's behavior detection success. Also, as I recall from reading his case file, he was an Iraqi war veteran suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and wasn't on his medication at the time.
Mr. Ron, would you like to comment on that? I know the Israelis were pioneers in this.
Yes. In Israel, the principle of behavior detection is part of a wider principle of identifying level of risk of the individual passengers, and is also based on looking at other sources of information rather than a just observation. So you have to look at it in that context. But I still have to say that the BDO program, despite the fact that it has been noted that both by GAO and the Academy of Science that there's no scientific support, but I need to say that there hasn't been a serious research into this.
Right.
So that by itself doesn't prove that it doesn't stand. In empiric terms, I think that at least those airports here in the U.S. that we have worked with on this issue, mostly with local police officers, there's been a reasonable level of success in detecting people with malicious intentions.
Larry, let me just ask you one more question, Mr. Ron. If for some reason I were to become president tomorrow and I appointed you the head of the TSA, what are the top 5 changes you would make to improve security and improve the efficiency of the system? Can you list maybe 5 off the top of your head?
Well, I'll start with 2. The first one is I would redirect the strategy towards a real risk-based strategy that identifies the level of risk of the individual passenger by the access to information that we have starting with prior to his or her arrival at the airport, and later on with the ability to talk to those very few passengers that we find as high-risk passenger based on our earlier analysis, and not just search them, but also talk to them and interview them to a level that would provide us with more information.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I did this just kind of as a thought experiment, and I'll just give you some. I went from Corpus Christi to Washington, D.C. without saying anything other than thank you to a person at the airport. That was no interaction beyond saying thank you to people who helped me.
Yeah, this is a critical point, because I think that the lack of contact between the security people and the passengers is one of our greatest shortcomings, because we just focus on items, and that is doomed to a failure because the technology that we have at this point is not good enough to provide us with a reasonable level of detection.